I used to read a book a week. I was doing this for about 6 months, and very recently I stopped doing this. When I was doing this, and towards the end of when I was doing this, I asked myself the question, is reading a waste of my time? For a lot of people, it's super helpful, and for a lot of people, they are super supportive of doing that and reading a book a week. And I have started to shift away from this, and now I read probably about a book every 2 months. I've done a whole video on why I read that little, and I only read a book every 2 months rather than a book a week. But basically, I just wanted to focus more. When it comes to is reading a waste of time, I believe no, but it can be. Why is this? I think a lot of people when they're reading, they're just trying to finish a book. You'll see a lot of people on social media who will post, look at me, I bought 52 books, I'm gonna read them over the course of this year, and look at me, I'm reading a book a week, and all that's great, but at the end of the day, they're kind of just flexing that they're reading this much, and they're not carrying nearly as much that they're actually trying to learn. So what I've done instead is I read a book every about 2 months, over that course of the 2 months, and what I do instead is I listen to a lot of podcasts. In my opinion, I think podcasts are a better version of books because it's more timely knowledge, first of all, because these podcasts come out a lot more regularly, but also there is a lot more of them and you can get a lot of information. You can probably get the same amount of information from about 150, 200 page book from an hour and 30-minute podcast. And when you do this, not only are you saving a lot of time, but for whatever reason, especially for me, when I listen to a podcast and absorbing information through audio rather than just reading it, I tend to absorb it better and actually use that in my life. But do I think reading is important? I believe yes and no. When it comes to reading, like I said, it is more important to be learning rather than just reading. Because like I said, a lot of people are just trying to read just to finish the book rather than actually trying to read so they can learn. If you want to read a book a week, that is great, but don't have that be some sort of flex. Like, oh, look at me, I read a book a week. Rather, try to absorb as much of that book as you possibly can, and maybe try listening to something on top of that. Maybe try to do a podcast as well, because learning is super important, but reading is not the only possible way to learn. And in my opinion, podcasts are better, especially for me. This obviously can vary between people. Some people will prefer reading, some people will prefer podcasts, audiobooks. But for me, I tend to learn best when I'm listening to some sort of podcast or maybe audiobook. But as always, strive for greatness.